Welcome everyone to this webinar that we're doing on the Corporate Transparency Act. We're going to give people just to have a second to get logged on. In the meantime, Crystal, I just want to double check that people can hear me. So I'm going to give you some authority to a talk if you want to just let me know if that comes through.
Yes, I can hear you.
Perfect. Thank you. So, like I said, we're gonna give people just a second on the webinar. We've done Zoom meetings before. We're playing around with some webinars, some things along those lines. So this will be a different type of platform. This shouldn't take too long. What we'll do is we'll go through the material that we prepared. Again, give people a couple minutes to log in. In the meantime, what you can do is there should be a Q&A function at the bottom. And so what I would encourage you to do is if you have questions, put them there in the questions and answers. And that's how we can kind of get through some of those questions, and I'll answer them as they make sense. If for some reason you have a question that doesn't get answered, I'll give you contact information. You can reach out to the Rental Housing Association, and feel free to ask those questions as they may come up. Okay, we're gonna get started here. Again, welcome to this webinar on the Corporate Transparency Act. Glad that you're here with us today. Should be some exciting, some exciting material, be able to provide. What's interesting about this Corporate Transparency Act is, it doesn't necessarily have to deal with rentals, right? It's not unique to the rental housing industry. It's unique to businesses. The reason we've talked about it and promoted it today is a vast majority of the members of the Rental Housing Association have businesses that are registered. And so we're going to talk about the history about, well, I'll show you. Here's the outline. We're going to talk about what the Corporate Transparency Act is, who the Corporate Transparency Act applies to, beneficial ownership information, procedures for compliance, and other considerations to be aware of. I'll also talk about, in other considerations, some common questions. We taught this class live in our office in Sandy. So I'll talk about some of the common questions we are seeing from property owners and property managers. So, overview of the Corporate Transparency Act. It is legislation that was passed in 2020 as part of the Anti-Money Laundering Act. It is an international effort between multiple countries to increase transparency in business operations. Essentially, if you would, the federal government basically said, we have enough information on large corporations, but we don't know what's happening with small corporations. And so we would like to be able to know what's going on. And in other words, they don't want US corporations to become shell companies for terrorist money and other types of money that they currently see flowing through the United States, is what this is part of. The legislative background. It is part of a broad effort to modernize U.S. anti-money laundering. It was passed in response to growing concerns about the use of anonymous shell companies in financial crimes. Again, they're seeing quite a few anonymous shell companies in financial crimes in the United States. And so it's an effort to try to crack down on those. As I mentioned, the law was passed in 2020 and became a This is being enforced by the Treasury Department for the United States. Treasury Department has a few divisions under it. Probably the most popular is or maybe least popular is the IRS. The IRS is under the Treasury Department, and this is being enforced by by what's called FinCEN, the Financial Crime Enforcement Network, is who's enforcing it. And we'll talk about effective dates. Like I said, it went into effect, the law, on January 1st, 2021, but enforcement has been delayed to 2024. So for any new company in 2024, this has already been ongoing. There's been a grace period until the end of the year for existing companies, and we'll talk in more detail about what that means. So again, the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network is the group enforcing this. The primary goal is, again, centered on preventing financial crimes and ensuring that bad actors can't hide money behind anonymous business entities. It's all about you being anonymous and knowing who individuals are. So, who is affected by this new law? Small businesses registered in the United States is the short answer. Most commonly LLCs and partnerships. A big question that got brought up and has been raised is, okay, so if I don't have a business registered, does this law apply to me? The answer is no. Even if you own a fourplex and that's what you're doing, but it's not owned by a business, you're just operating that fourplex and collecting the money personally and reporting your personal information to the IRS, then this law does not apply to you. However, if you are involved with any business, or if you own a handful of LLCs, or if you've set up 6 LLCs for your 6 different rental properties, then you're involved with 6 different companies, and this will apply to each of them. So again, it applies to most property managers and landlords operating as an LLC or partnership, and they will be required to report. The short answer here is if you have a business registered with the state, meaning you have articles of incorporation that have been filed with the state of Utah, then this law applies to you. Corporations it applies to as well. However, not the large corporations. They get an exemption. It's small, closely held corporations. So an S Corp, LLCs again. There might be a few other affected companies, limited liability partnerships. Some HOAs are having to comply. I saw there was a question on HOAs. I'll get to that. But that's, again, it depends on your state law. But basically, again, to summarize this, and I'll show you some additional points at the end of this webinar, some additional things and resources and answer questions. And again, you can feel free to reach out to me, and we'll do the Q&A at the end. But if you had to summarize this page and write down just a couple notes, I would think in terms of, did I have to register this business with the state, and did I file documents with the state to register this business? If you did, this law applies to you. There are exemptions, as I mentioned: large operating companies, regulated companies such as banks, credit unions, investment companies, and dormant entities. Certain dormant entities that meet certain criteria are exempt, but it's rare in the context of an active property management or rental business. If we're being honest, it's rare. Where it might come up is, a business that you didn't file articles of dissolution with, or you didn't dissolve the company. And so it's been dormant, and it's been dormant for 5 years, and all the properties owned by the company sold. There's no bank accounts. It may be exempt. If you think you land in that world, again, I have some resources to kind of go through all the exemptions. There's quite a few of them. These are the 3 most common ones. Again, well-regulated entities like banks, credit unions, nonprofits, large corporations, and then dormant entities are exempt. Again, assuming for the moment that that doesn't apply to most businesses out there. So your business likely is not exempt. So what do we have to report? We have to report beneficial company information and beneficial ownership information. And so I will explain this. There's going to be a little bit redundancy here, but first I want to talk about what beneficial ownership information is. Again, they don't want shell companies. This law is designed to stop a company existing with no person with a pulse involved. So the first step in your analysis, and you can write this down in columns if you would: column A, column B, column C, column D. Column A is to figure out, do you own a company? Yes or no? That's column A. Column B is going to be the company's info, and I'll talk about what info specifically, but that goes in column B. Column C is, who are the beneficial owners? The who involved. And so again, if I was drawing this out, and what I'd recommend is having a sheet of paper and say, we're going to list all the companies I own in column A. Next to that on column B, I'm going to list that company's info that I need to report, and I'll show you what that is. And then column C, I need to list who the beneficial owners of the company are. Here's what a beneficial owner is. A beneficial owner are those with significant equity stakes in the company. Significant equity stakes means that they own 25% or more. So that's ownership. So if an individual receives, either owns 25% or has a vested right to 25% of the equity or more of the company, then they are a beneficial owner. So I'd write that person's name down on my column C that we were talking about. Who are the beneficial owners? Who owns the business? Or put another way, who has more than 25% ownership into the business? The other type of beneficial owner are those with substantial control over it. So, or substantial influence over company decisions. These would be managing members of an LLC. So let's say I had a member managed LLC, and you would know if it was member managed by your articles of incorporation and your bylaws or your operating agreement. So those things are important. This is where those become important. But what I would typically have is, let's say I had 7 owners of an LLC. None of them have over 25%, but my management agreement or my operating agreement says that 3 of those owners are the member managers. Then those 3 are beneficial owners and the others are not. So again, our first 2 answers are, or our first 2 points are of who a beneficial owner is anyone with 25% or more ownership, and anyone with substantial control or substantial influence over the company decisions. Now, here's what I would say. You can, of course, kind of try to figure out the fine lines. And again, I will show you some resources. But when in doubt, I'd say report. It doesn't hurt to report someone with under 25%. You're not going to get in trouble for saying, hey, this person's a beneficial owner, and they own 20%. They're a little bit under the threshold, or you think they have some control, but you're not sure. Over-reporting is the safe harbor here. That's not to say what you should or shouldn't do necessarily. Again, you can try to follow the law in the best way possible that you know how. But for intents and purposes here, over-reporting is probably the safest way if you're nervous about getting in trouble or something. This can get complicated with complex ownership structures. Again, let's say you have a real estate holding is owned by multiple entities. You may have to trace that all the way down all of those lines. Another way to look at it too, let's say a business is owned by a trustee of a trust, and the trust has beneficiaries. We're going to have to list those beneficiaries as well as the trustee. So again, if you have complex ownership structures, that can complicate things a little bit. So information required. Okay. This is that column B I was talking about. So first is list the company that you own. Second, in column B is this is what you are required to register with FinCEN. And I will show you on this webinar how to file that information. It's fairly simple, but I'll show you how. But this is what you need on that piece of paper to know. We need to know the entity name, which is the full legal name as it appears registered with the state. We need to know the business address, the state of formation or registration. So what state is it registered for? 90% of the businesses that are involved and have businesses, it's going to be Utah. And then the entity identification number. It's usually the EIN that you get from the IRS, or a similar tax ID number if you have a different type of number. So again, column A, the name of the company. Column B, I need this information. Column C is going to be the beneficial owners. And then here's the information you need from those beneficial owners. You need from those, this would be column D. This is our last column in our 4 columns if you're writing it down that way, if that helps it flow in your brain. For every single beneficial owner, and again, the beneficial owner is someone with substantial control or more than 25% ownership, we need to know their full legal name, their date of birth, their current address. That can be business address, but it needs to be a current address, And then we need a copy of their driver's license or state issued or government issued ID, and that could include a passport. But we need those four things: full legal name, date of birth, current business address, or the identification number and issuing document. So a copy of that. Now, when to file. So that's what we need. We need those four columns. And the government, that's all they want to know. They don't want to know anything else. They just want to know, what companies do you have? Tell us the company info. Who are the owners, so to speak? And they call it beneficial owners because it's more than just ownership, it's broader. And tell me the information about that. Again, name, birth date, address, and an ID. But when? Timelines. For an existing entity starting on January 1st, 2024, the initial report is, so if it was formed before this year, if it was formed before 2024, then you have until the end of the year to file this information. If it's a new entity formed in 2024 and beyond, you have 30 days from formation to file this information. Now, how to file, I'll show you and I'll walk through after a little Q&A, but they are submitted electronically to FinCEN. They're using a reporting system, and it is pretty self-explanatory. It's pretty quick to get through. And then the other thing you'll need, in addition to having the information, you do need a copy of the driver's license, passport, whatever that document is. You do have to report changes as well. This is a one-time report. It's not ongoing. You don't have to do this every single year, but you do have to report if there are changes. So if there's a change to the beneficial ownership, so there's someone no longer is a beneficial owner, or there's a new beneficial owner, we have to report that. If there's a change to the business structure, again, change in address, things along those lines, any change in the information you're reporting, then you'd have to submit those changes within 30 days of the change. Again, this mostly comes up, honestly, when you're transferring property or bringing in new investors. Those are the most common ways that a property manager and landlord would see that information need to be filed. And again, it's within 30 days of the change. Penalties for the law. Failure to file updates in the reports on time can result in significant penalties. The law says it's between $200 or $250 and $500 per day. I don't know. I can't tell you in good faith whether or not that's what's going to happen on January 1st, 2025. The government certainly has the authority to file those charges on that date. However, the bar associations across the United States are reporting that they think that over half the companies in the United States are not going to be in compliance with this law come enforcement period. And so it will be interesting to see what enforcement looks like. If you commit fraud on the report, so that's if you don't report at all, it's $250 to $500 per day. If you do report, but you report fraudulently, again, this is extreme cases where you're intentionally trying to hide money. So let's say you are one of these companies that's receiving terrorist money, and you have secretly shelled it up well enough that no one can track down who the local person is in Utah that's receiving and helping this money flow through to Russia or to your country of origin that you care to have it come from. Then in that case, there potentially is imprisonment and those types of things for willful fraudulent submissions. Again, that's not an accident, something along those lines. Those types of penalties come in if you are fraudulently submitting information to try to hide and get illegal money. That said, stop the share here. Questions that we have, and then I'll show you how to file. You can also feel free to raise your hand. I'm fine to take some live questions too. You're more than welcome to ask. Small HOAs. HOAs have to file. Most HOAs have to file. It could depend on how you're set up with the state. I'd recommend an HOA to consult their legal attorney, but most HOAs have to file. And the beneficiaries are usually your boards with votes. And so I guess that's the short answer to that question is that's how that HOAs have to file, and if a board member has a vote, they are a beneficial owner. When does the law take effect? And if we just created our LLC a month ago, are we already in non-compliance? Yeah, probably. Again, it's that 30-day window. But that's again, you have a 30-day window to file it if it was formed in 2024. And so, yeah, you could file again. I don't think they're going to issue harsh penalties right now. Most people are just unaware of this law. So you should be okay to get as long as you get it done, right? Um, so someone asked, slides mention corporations that own and manage real estate. I presume it applies to all corporations on non-real estate related as well. Yes, any corporation to the state. Now, it filed with the state. Every single one. Pest control, my law firm, all the above have to file. That said, we're looking specifically at real estate because this is offered for our members, and so that's what I've talked to some members, and that kind of seems outside of the scope, and it is a little bit outside of our scope, other than about 75% of our members own a business, and so we find and probably about the same percentage run their rentals through that business entity filed with the state, and so it seemed really pertinent for our members. And again, there's an education concern that we want to make sure these are addressed. Copy of the slideshow. Yes. I will send out a copy of these slides. Actually, I'll do you one better. This is being recorded. And so we will have a recording of this webinar posted to our website, probably early next week, as well as either on Friday or Monday. An email will go out to everyone that registered, whether to the live session or to this webinar session. We'll send out an email of the slides. Do DBAs have to file? No. There is a spot for DBAs to file, and I'll show you that once we kind of get through some of the questions and come back. There is a spot for DBAs to file, but DBAs don't have to file in and of themselves. But when you register your company, you'll have to list out every DBA that's potentially registered with them. Question about multi-tiered LLCs. Parent LLC owns multiple child LLCs. What you would do is each child, so a picture, if I have parent ABC LLC, and then I have A LLC, B LLC, D LLC, so on and so forth. Each one of those will have to register, and they would report that the parent LLC is their beneficial owner. And then the parent LLC is gonna have to report and say who the actual people are. So it creates traceability that way. But yes, the multi-tiered LLC will have to report that they're owned by a parent, and then the parent LLC has to file its own filing saying who owns this parent LLC. Question about if you, how do I know if my LLC is registered with the state? If it's an LLC, it's registered with the state. There's no way to have I mean, I suppose you can call yourself an LLC and not be, just like someone could call themselves a doctor and not be a doctor. But in order to be an LLC, it has to be registered with the state. That said, if you go to corporations.utah.gov, again, that website is corporations.utah.gov, you can search for businesses. There's a search business tool, and you can search by name, and it will search every business in the state of Utah. So that would be one way to check if your business is there, is to go onto that website and search for your business name and see how it's registered. Again, so this one says taxed on the child LLC only, but all three registered state. If it's registered, it doesn't matter how it's taxed. If it's registered with the state, it has to register with FinCEN. As a landlord, do we notify our owners and they have to file their own reports? If you're on so that question, the individual asked that question. If you're comfortable, if you want to raise your hand, I can put you to speak, and so I can ask another clarifying question. What I would say is, if you want to do this on behalf of an owner, You can, if you're helping an owner of a different company register with, and you helped with their business registration, I mean, you could file on their behalf as a manager. I think that would be fine. I'm trying to read that question and make sure I answer it correctly. If the owners, if you own a company and there's multiple owners of it, multiple landlords, then they'd have to report. Now she's raising her hand here, so let's. Jude, if that was your question, do you want to help me clarify that?
Yeah.
Yes, what I wanted to see is we manage property for different owners, but multiple investors who own their properties under LLCs. Do we just notify them of this new law and we have no liability if they do or if they don't report? That was my concern.
No, thank you. That's a really good question. Yeah, that's what I would do. There's not going to be liability, particularly if you're not involved. If you're involved with the LLC, like as an owner, and you're somehow involved on the articles of corporation, then I would be a little bit more concerned to say, yeah, you need to register, and make sure that it gets done. If you're just helping out an owner, more or less, and you could just notify them and say, hey, I heard about this new law. We want to make sure you know about it. I guess in some ways, that's kind of what we are doing at the Rental Housing Association, right? Hey, we're helping you with these in some way in capacity. We're providing a benefit that you're using for your company. We want you to be aware of this new regulation. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Single member LLC may not have a tax ID number. Series LLC, how do they file? So a series LLC would be one LLC filed with the state. So that would just be one filing. So that part's easy. If it's a series LLC, it's one filing. That's the benefit of the series. If the series single member LLC does not have a tax ID number, then you would use your social security number. So it would be registered to your social as the tax holder. So when it asks for identification, that's where you'd put it. Yeah, so again, that question gets brought up to clarify. A series LLC does not have a child LLC. It's one entity with multiple series. And so it's where it's one entity, only the one entity has to report. Now, if a series LLC owns actual other LLCs, then you would have to report. But it may be more helping clarify the business structure law there. A series LLC can have multiple series under it, but it can also have child LLCs. The series, the multiple children series fall under one entity. It's still one entity report. But if a series LLC also owns sister LLCs registered with the state, then you'd have to report those. Put another way, the series within a sister LLC are not registered with the state, so you don't have to report them. What is the website address to register the LLC? Yeah, so to register with the state would be at that corporations.utah.gov. That's how you register. And if you don't register your business with the state, then you don't receive any business benefit back, right? You don't receive any legal protections and tax protections. There's a couple there. As a sole practitioner LLC, are you required to file? So, and here's what I'd say. To, again, just make sure we're clear on our legal structure law a little bit. A sole practitioner is someone that does a business but has not filed anything. They don't have a business bank account. They don't have anything filed with the state. It's just a kid on the street selling lemonade, or a landlord with a basement apartment collecting rent. And when they file their taxes, they report that as personal income, right? And that gets reported to the IRS as personal income. Then you have what are called single member LLCs, and that's an LLC with one owner. There's not a sole practitioner proprietorship LLC. So you're either a sole proprietor or you're a single member LLC. The single member LLC has to file, sole proprietor does not. Saw another hand. Was there a hand? Was there one more hand that I? What that website does and how to register and just kind of what it looks like. I sit down. So those website BOI e-filing.fincen.gov. I'll see if I can pull this down just a tad. So it's right here, as you can see, it's called BOI. So that's the beneficial ownership information. And just so you're aware, that's what it's going to be referred to from here on out and here on out is beneficial ownership information. And it's also called the beneficial ownership information report. So again, that's what you're reporting. So BOI e-filing.fincen.gov. You can also just, if you Google it, you can get there. I will warn you, if you try to just Google it, you're going to get a couple of advertising companies that are like, hey, $1,000, we'll file for you. It's just companies trying to make some money. That's why they're in the ads, but they appear first because they're paying for those ads. You can go to the official website and register yourself. If you can see, there's help information. In fact, I'm going to open that in a new tab for us, and I can show you what some of that looks like. Some other types of reporting. So you can see that banks have to report already through this. Large corporations have been having to use the system for a while. But we're going to click here, File BOIR. You can prepare a PDF version and fill it all out by a PDF document if that's what you're more comfortable with, or you can file online. And that's what I'd recommend here is the file the BOIR. And we're going to prepare, warning, this is, a legal document from the US government. And here's what we file. So we can file initial report, correction period, updated report, or a newly exempt company. Exempt company like a nonprofit, I recommend filling this out. And as you can see, confirm, and that's easy here. And you can see all we have to type out is the name of the company, the government tax identification type, and then we submit. I don't have to fill all these are blanked out. I can't even select them. We just hit submit and you're done. Said, hey, yes, I own this company, but it's exempt. Don't worry about it. Assuming that doesn't apply, we're filing initial report. It's going to give us some consent, date prepared, tells you about the Privacy Act and Paperwork Reduction Act. Reporting company information. So this is column B that I was talking about. If you're to divide it up in columns, which I would recommend. You can see, I can talk about these if people have questions. You don't really need to know about them right now, but I just type in the reporting company name. So RHA, Rental Housing Association. We also have been known and we have registration as the Utah Apartment Association. Our EIN, it's either social, TIN, or foreign. It's an EIN. We type that in, right? It's W9 dash, I can't remember off the top of my head. Country of formation, that would be United States. Formation state, Utah, right? And then the address. And that's it. That's all they want to know about the company, right? Name of the company, address, state of formation, and the identification number. This middle category is company applicant. It's basically who's filling this out. We want to know who's filling out this information. It can be an owner, but that's essentially all it is we want to know who at the company is sitting and filling out this information. And then this is so that's not something we talked about before, but you would need that. And then there's the beneficial owner information, the BOI, and that's column C. Again, if you were making it into categories, that's column C and D. Column C is every single one, and see, I can add multiple. So if I have 3 owners, 1, 2, 3, I can add, let's say I have 5 that I want to report. And then under each one, I'm going to fill out their name, last name, first name. And again, if it's a legal entity, so again, back to the child LLC. If a child LLC, and here's what you need to be careful on. Just because you have a child LLC doesn't mean it was set up as a legal child LLC. It could just be a sister company, more like a sister. And so you want to maybe check who owns that company on the articles of incorporation, right? How have you set that company up? You do want to double check. But if I did truly have a child LLC that was only owned by the one parent, I would list the parent company name here. Otherwise, we fill out this information, first, last name, address. So name, address, identification document type. So is it a driver's license, issued ID, US passport, foreign passport, the number. So this would be your driver's license number. The state, Utah again, if that's what it applies. And then here is where you'd put a picture of the driver's license in the identifying document. So again, it's just those two columns of information, the business entity, the 4 things they want to know, and then the owners of that and what they want to know. And then you hit submit. And that's this website. The last thing I wanted to show you on this website, I had mentioned that on that they had help information here. You can see there's filing methods, quick reference guide, step-by-step instructions. See the benefit, step-by-step instructions real quick. Yep. So it says preparing for filing. So you can use this. Hey, here's everything I need to know. So it can help gather all the information in advance. It can show you a walkthrough of that website that I just went over myself. The other thing you can do is look at this, and this is that first document in help. So again, going back to our main website, which is BOI e-filing. If you go to help here, you can download this beneficial owner information report filing instructions. This walks you through where to report, completing the filing. It can help answer some of those ancillary questions. The last resource I wanted to show you on their website that I think is beneficial is if you go to just fincen.gov/BOI. So it's a little bit different. It's not the filing, but fincen.gov/BOI. That's right here. There is this, if you scroll down, there's frequently asked questions page. And I'll include this in the email that goes out on Friday or Monday. But you can see it has tons of questions. Should my company report? So I can even search here for exempt. So are some companies exempt from the reporting? You can see over here all the results that hit. But here's exemption numbers, exempt short title. Here's the types of companies that are exempt. Are certain corporation entities such as statutory trust, business trust, or foundations reporting companies. This Q&A is quite extensive, and it can answer a bunch of questions in deep detail that you might have a hard time. Again, they provide flow charts, which is kind of cool. So what is a ownership interest, equity, stock, or voting rights? Capital or profit interest, convertible instruments, and then there's the catch-all. So again, these can have a huge ability to help answer a lot of questions, the FAQ. And again, that's going to be www.fincen.gov/BOI-FAQs. I will again send out those two links, the filing website, as well as this frequently asked questions when we send out these slides, and it will go to everyone that registered. We'll make sure that I get that link out again, either Friday or Monday. Okay, a couple more questions. You stated that most HOAs need to file as a business. Did I understand that correctly? Yeah, you'd want to check with, I've heard differing reports, if I'm being 100% honest, from HOA attorneys on whether or not they have to file or not. It seems to be set up in how they're registered with the state. And so that's, if I'm being 100% candid, That's one question I'm trying to seek some clarity on, is what types of HOAs need to file again, because some of the HOA attorneys have been differing in their opinions on that from what I've talked to them. It does seem like most HOAs do. There's a few that may qualify for exemptions depending on what they're managing, but I think it's safe to assume, unless you hear differently, that an HOA has to file. If the property is owned by two separate trusts, how is that filed? I'm going to put that question on hold for half of a second because this comes up. And it's kind of a complicated answer because we have to re-understand how we think about trust and how the law treats trust versus what our default thoughts are on trust. Yeah, so someone commented HOA boards have to fill out one for each member, or does the property manager fill out on our behalf? It's not for you'd want to fill out one, and so it'd usually be the manager would file on your behalf. Now, again, you might want to ensure that that's done, but it's only one. The HOA is the entity, but each board member is going to have they're going to need that information from the board member, right? They're going to need to know the board member's name, birthday, address, and a photo ID, and a identification number. So in a multi-owner entity, you should do one filing with the benefit rather than having each BOA do their own filing. Correct. That's exactly the process. If there's overlap and there's multiple filings, then I think that can be reconciled. I don't think they're going to throw a fit about that, but it's one filing with each owner listed out. So put another way, one filing for each entity. And then under each entity, there might be several owners that have to get that information. For a child LLC, the first name is required. Also, what is identifying document do we upload for that child? Again, it's likely going to be, again, I may want on that one. You can feel free to reach out to me and we can walk through it. I'd have to double check a little bit of the FAQ on filing that report. The identifying document would likely be the owner's interest. Put another way, when we've been doing them, again, they say that you can report the company, but when we've been doing them, we've just been tracking it through to the beneficial owner of the company. But if you're in that situation, I'll put up my contact info. Feel free to reach out to me and we can walk through how to do that. And again, candidly, I've seen it done twice from the business attorneys and through the Business Bar Association, or the prop business section of the Bar Association for the state of Utah. And so I might just get a little bit more clarification. When I've been assisting with them, we've been just tracking it to the end user beneficial owner and just filing that. So if it's being weird on how to submit the business information, like I said, I'll double check on that and feel free to reach out to me. And I'll put up my contact info. If I have a registered HOA and added my personal info, can the other board members log in and add themselves later as an update? That's a really good question. That's where, if you recall, I saw there was a little field that said request BOI info. I had a landlord, they told me it took about 10 minutes to get it back. If you're involved in multiple filings, or you're a board member on an HOA and you don't want to send a copy of your driver's license to the manager and you don't want to go through that hassle, you can request from FinCEN a FinCEN identification number. We're going to pull that up together. This is beneficial. This is useful. So let's see here. right here, create a fin. So again, if I go to fincen.gov/BOI and go to this, it says create a FinCEN ID. It's optional. You don't have to do this. If you do it, it takes a minute to fill out, and you get it back in 10 minutes. So what you do is you create an account with FinCEN, you submit the information they want. So you'd submit your and this would be you as an owner information, but you would submit your name, address, copy of your driver's license, and those things. And then let's say I was involved as a board member on multiple companies, right? Or let's say I was a partner. Oh, here's a really good example. Let's say I'm in my business model is I set up rental properties, and I make myself as part of my management agreement part owner on the LLC, and there's one LLC per company. I might have 50 LLCs in that situation. So what I would do is I'd come here to get to request this FinCEN ID number, and I'm going to get that one number, and attached to that number is going to be my name, address, driver's license, the picture, all of it. And then when my board member asks me for information, I can just send them the number and say, here's my information. You can see that here when I go to beneficial owner, and I go to beneficial owner number 1, I can just type in the ID. And if I type in a valid ID, I don't have to fill out any other information. I just type that in once and it's good. So going back to the question, again, sorry, that's a little bit complicated. But going back to the question, if we register the HOA and added my personal info, can the other board members log in and add themselves and later as an update? That's usually not how it goes. You need to gather the information as you go along. But if that's the model you're going, that ID might actually work best. So you would send, hey, here's my ID, here's my ID. You collect all the IDs from each board member and then can log it once that way. Again, another way to do it would be to just have each board member submit that information. And once you have it all, you go in and register it. Is there a problem registering if you don't have to? No. If over-reporting here is one of those things that they're not going to be mad that you over-reported, right? Now, again, you don't lie and say, hey, I have a business, and you don't. That doesn't make sense, to be honest, if we're being candid. But if you're nervous about it and you want to make sure you're compliant, so you're doing so in good faith, over-reporting's fine here, right? Again, they're trying to catch people trying to hide illegal activity through ABC property, which is owned by, BBB property, which is owned by CCC, which is owned by a Cuban registered company, which is owned by a Russian entity, which is owned by an Iraqi entity, right? That's what they know. There's reports of that happening, and we have no idea who the local person is involved with this company, and the states they can't get it from the state, so they're just putting the onus on you as the business owner. So that's a long way to say, it's fine to overshare here. In fact, I think it's a safety net. If someone's 20%, or they're like, man, I don't know, they have some control, but not a ton of control, I would report them as someone with control over the company. It's free to file. Question is how much to file. Again, there's companies out there that charge. Basically, all they're going to do is make you fill out the same information and then just go copy and paste it over on the other side. And solely, well, I don't want to call anyone out specifically, but those companies exist. I don't recommend that. Where it might make sense to have some counsel here is if you have a complicated business structure, want to make sure you get it right. Legal advice might be beneficial here, just to make sure it's filed right. My firm and a handful of others I've been involved with have helped on that. But if you feel competent enough to know the business name and know who the owners are, and you feel confident enough to just go to that website and type that information in, you should be fine to file on your own, and it's completely free. I thought I saw that trusts were in the exempt category. Yes and no. Again, I'll talk about trust here in a second. Looks like everyone can add their names at different times. Is that correct? Or does the info need to be all entered at the same time? I've always entered it at the same time. If it can be entered multiple times and come back to, I'm not aware of that function, but I'm not saying it doesn't exist. It would be smart if it did exist. I'm just not 100% sure. What I would do is if someone's done that and wants to put it in the chat and is registered at separate times, let me know and I can share that with the group. Or if someone in the next couple days lets me know, I'll send it out in the email. So that might be for the email purposes, one thing I follow up with. I'll follow up with the HOAs and I'll follow up with entering information multiple times or whether or not it has to be done all at the same time. Again, I think for peace of mind, it's just easiest to do it all at the same time, at least per entity, right? It makes the most sense to do it. Yeah, after registering, you get a receipt. That was a question. They'll confirm that it was submitted and received, so you should be good to go there. Property owner, so okay, we have the trust questions. Okay. Here's what I'm gonna say on trust. So I mentioned on top of being the legal counsel and government affairs director for the Rental Housing Association, I do have my own private practice, and we practice primarily estate planning. It's what we do, and so there's a misconception here that's hard to unwind a little bit, but it's beneficial. I apologize if this is a little bit tangenty, but I think it applies to enough people. Trusts are not legal entities and they do not exist. Another way to look at it is under United States law and under the Supreme Court, business entities are people and they can be sued in court and they can appear in court via legal counsel and they can own property. Trusts are not legal or entities and they're not allowed to own property. Again, it's a little bit of misconception. We think, wait a second, but my trust owns property. A trust is a legal relationship, not a legal entity. The other type of legal relationship that exists out there are marriages. Marriages are completely legal, but they are not legal entities. A marriage cannot own a home. A spouse can own a home, and spouses can own homes together as part of the marriage relationship. And that marriage relationship might have legal consequences to it. So for instance, if you get a divorce and you own property individually, you probably have to split that property in half. Not because, and let's say someone owned a home by themselves, got married, was married for 50 years, and then they get divorced. Even though they're the only one that owns that home, the legal relationship steps in and says, no, you got to split it 50-50. The marriage didn't own the house. The individual still did. Trusts are the same. Trusts are legal relationships. They are not legal entities. And so a trust cannot own property. On the title, you'll notice it's always someone's name on title. And that's a universal truth in the United States. In fact, there's actually really good precedent and recent explanation of this from the Ninth Circuit out of California in a landlord-tenant dispute. I won't dive into the details on that case, though it's interesting because it involves landlord-tenant and trust. But if you look at the title of a home, it is always owned by a person. Now, they may own it as a trustee in the relationship, but they are the owner. Now, that said, they own the home. So if I have a company, so a trust doesn't rent and a trust doesn't register with the state. Now, someone brought up exempt ones. Some states do have trusts register with the state, and that's why they're exempt under FinCEN, because they say now the trust is not itself a company. So how does this affect you? What do you do with this knowledge? Two scenarios. One, a home is owned by Bob Vance as trustee of the Vance Family Trust. But that's it. There is no business entity there, and so no report is needed. You're fine to proceed without filing a report because there's no business entity involved. It's owned by Bob Vance. Bob Vance owns it outright. Now, he has legal and fiduciary obligations because of his relationship to the beneficiary, to the trust. But again, it's like a marriage. I have fiduciary duties to you, have fiduciary duties to your spouse, but that's not because you guys own stuff. Like, you don't sue the marriage doesn't own it. It's not the Gavin and Amber marriage on the title. It's our names, right? So the same thing there. There's no registration needed because the trust owns it and you're fine. You're good to go. Another scenario though. The home, and again, this all comes down to title on the home, right? In this overlap. So that scenario A is it's owned by Bob Vance as trustee. Again, let's just say it's owned by the trust, but there's no reporting because no business entities involved. Another scenario. The home is owned by BV LLC. Now I have a state registered entity owning the property. And the entity is owned, the LLC is owned by Bob Vance as trustee of the Vance Family Trust. Okay, so I have three. I now have up my ladder. I have the property, which is owned by the LLC, which is owned by Bob Vance. Now there's a company involved, the second tier. I have to report that information from the company, not the trust, for the company. But who are the beneficial owners? Bob Vance certainly is because he has control of the company. But so are the beneficiaries of the trust. So if that trust lists out as beneficiaries, Bob Vance, Phyllis Vance, Child A and Child B, those individuals are beneficial owners of the company. So again, we're 4 tiers. So I have the property, the company, the trust, and the beneficiaries. I have to report for the company and the company information, and the beneficial owners are going to be the people listed in tier 3 and 4. Bob Vance, because he's the manager, as the trustee, he's going to have significant control over the company operations. And these individuals are beneficial owners. They are benefiting from the trust. And my advice has been, even if it's now the next debate or the next question is likely going to be, okay, what if there's 6 beneficiaries? What do I do there? Because that's not 60%. And in the estate planning world, my advice is to list out every beneficiary, even if their share is not that. If it's an LLC owned by a trust, we need to list out every beneficiary. It's made estate planning complicated, if we're being 100% honest, but sorry, that's a little bit tangenty, but it's relevant. I've had that question pop up quite a bit, and so I want to make sure that that got answered. For those of you that have previously asked about a trust, I've made that, I've got rid of your question. So if you have another one, let me know. Will this information be made public? All websites are hackable these days. It is not public. It is hackable. The same way that the IRS's information is hackable. It's ran by the same department. So I'll be honest, if they get into this, they're probably getting into the Social Security office. And if they hack Social Security, then your information's gone anyway. If I'm being, it's a not a great way to think about that, but I mean, it's not public. It is privately held information. It's the same entity. It's a sister organization to the IRS. In fact, I suspect that the IRS is going to be the entity used to enforce the penalties on this, if we're being 100% candid. But I mean, it is hackable. The largest data breach in modern history, or one of the largest, was I think it was TransUnion was hacked, right? So like 1/3 of the United States citizens' social securities are on the black web. It might even be more than that. Maybe 50% of US citizens' social security numbers are out there. And that's, again, because TransUnion, the largest credit reporting entity in the US, had it. So it's not public. It is hackable the same way that the IRS is hackable. It's probably the same security measures protecting it, if I'm being 100% honest. I'm unclear how to remove a beneficial owner after initial filing, specifically when an HOA board members change. What you do is you'd file an update on FinCEN's website. And so there's an update page that we're adding a clarification. Contact me. We can walk through the removal process. I'll put up my contact information. We can walk through that. As far as removing someone when that time comes, that's something we can help show you how to do. Can you register an S corporation on FinCEN? So again, one of those weird things that is maybe not well understood, similar to trust, is an S corp. An S corp is not a legal entity either. It's a tax filing status. So, here's how I'd explain it. I have a corporation filed with the state of Utah. That corporation, when I file, and so the state recognizes that as a corporation. When I file my taxes, I can tell the IRS, hey, this entity is a for-profit corporation or a nonprofit corporation, and I want to be taxed accordingly. But the state doesn't really necessarily care a whole lot. They do a little bit, but for intents of this analogy, they don't. Same thing with an S corp. I have an LLC registered with the state here, okay? I then go to the IRS and say, I want to be taxed as a partnership LLC with multiple members. I want to be taxed as a sole member LLC, or I want to be taxed as an S corp. But those are IRS identifications. They are not state verifications. The state does not know if it's a partnership tax, if it's a sole member tax, or if it's a S corp tax. The state only knows an LLC exists, and we are going to give it LLC legal protections for liability purposes. How you guys want to handle your taxes, work it out with the IRS. That's not our business. And so to answer the question, if you have an S corp, then on the legal side, not the tax side, on the legal side, it's an LLC. And I'm willing to bet that the articles of incorporation and the way it's set up with the bank is as an LLC. And the way it's registered with the IRS is a S corp LLC. And so that's how you can register an S corp with FinCEN. Again, so put another way, an S corp is a tax status, not a legal status. It's a relationship status. Like I said, those get convoluted a little bit. There's been a couple tangents there. I apologize, but hopefully that's beneficial. There. Are there any additional questions? Individuals can feel free to raise your hand if you have a specific question. Seeing none, let me double check here. Seeing none, here's what I'll do. I'll share this. I apologize. Here's what I'll share. Well, I'll share my contact info and get that up. In the meantime, as I pull that up, I mean, feel free to take a picture with your phone, snap a screenshot, whatever works best for you for my contact info. As a follow-up, the 3 bits of information I'd have. One is we'll have a follow-up email, like I said, likely early next week. I'm thinking on Monday is when that will be prepared. It'll have a copy of the slides. It will show you where on the website this webinar is recorded and posted. In addition to that, it will have, I'll include those 2 bits of information, the HOA clarification, and then maybe some other frequently asked questions that got asked today, just so that there's some clarification. You're more than welcome to reach out to our office. We can help answer questions where we have it. I will say this is a little bit outside of our expertise. We're well aware of it. We're tracking it. We're educating ourselves more and more about this. But as far as the Rental Housing Association, there might be legal situations and legal complex structures you're involved with where you may need some legal advice to walk through and to read your articles of incorporation, read your management agreements to determine. One way around that is, again, to overshare and over provide this information. So that's the first part is, again, feel free to reach out to us, use this as a resource and look for that email. The second information, last thing I'll leave you with is that frequently asked question site is fairly comprehensive. They've tried to make this, while they've done a poor job at marketing this and letting business owners in the United States know that this law is going into effect. They've done a good job on their website of providing quality information about it. Now, do people know to go look for that? I don't know. But there is quality information. Those frequently asked questions are pretty good. Well, again, thanks for coming to this webinar. If there's any technical difficulties anyone had, I apologize. This is the first webinar we've done. I think we're going to bring in a couple of these and try them a little bit more often to provide more information, quality information, a little bit more freely. But thanks for coming today. I see a couple hands. I can get to those. In the meantime, I'm going to put up my, like I said, let me put up my contact info for just half a second. I apologize. It does have my legal stuff. I use this when I do a bunch of different presentations on like estate planning. And so that's why that's there. Feel free. This is I'm the Director of Government Affairs for the Rental Housing Association. That's my email and phone number. Feel free to take a picture of this right here for rental housing questions that you may have. My face is there in case you just remember my annoying voice and you want to remember, and you're like, hey, who was that again? It's there. So if you take a picture of it, you can have that card digitally. Okay. Hey, feel free to jump off. Appreciate the feedback. I saw a hand from Maria. Maria, did you still have that question? Maria, wait, I have a question from Addison. Addison, go ahead. Addison, I have you as muted. While we wait for Addison, again, feel free to jump off. I'll end it here in a second. I'll give Addison just half more second. If not, feel free to reach out in the chat. Okay. I see that it was accidental hand raise. Okay, we're good to go. All right. Well, again, thank you so much. I know that's a bit of information. It's a kind of a fire hose. It's fairly navigable. It's fairly easy to navigate. It's easy to get the information. It's a matter of doing it. Again, thank you for coming out. Thanks for being a member of the Rental Housing Association, and feel free to reach out if you have follow-up questions. Hope you guys all have a good Wednesday night and happy Halloween.